Sir Ian Fleming's James Bond novels are the latest to be edited by sensitivity readers, which is Orwellian, to say the least. Following a review commissioned by Ian Fleming Publications Limited, several racial references to black people have either been reworked or removed altogether, and the new issues will be accompanied by a disclaimer warning readers that the books were written at a time when terms and attitudes which might be considered offensive by modern viewers were commonplace. There's also, of course, the staunch undercurrents of, as some would say it, misogyny in the James Bond, the whole thing, really. Anyway, let's talk to the host of Really 007 podcast. It's Thomas Pickup. Thank you very much. Thomas, great to have you on the show. Look, what's going on here? I mean, is this just a woke brigade, yes, again, getting involved in something that doesn't need to be touched?
I don't know whether it's something so political like that. I do know that certain things probably did have to change. Like there's a title of a chapter on Live and Let Die, which uses an extremely offensive word that certainly wouldn't be published today. But we have to look at them and think these were historical fiction novels that were written in the time. You know, people will have to accept that there will be things that now certain people find unacceptable. Certainly some of the language Fleming used, I think everyone would find unacceptable. But we don't want it to be the slippery slope to editing every single historical fiction or non-fiction document that includes things we don't like. You know, I'd have something like a disclaimer at the start. They sometimes have that in films, you know. This doesn't necessarily reflect our attitudes now. And when a teacher's teaching things, you know, like novels that, you know, Agatha Christie had to change the title of one novel, which was correct. But that was in her lifetime. But I think it's better to have it there as it is, and then a teacher, for instance, and readers can just read up about it and educate themselves about the concept and how things have improved.
I get any reference to overt racism and stuff like that. Obviously, yeah, there's no need for anyone to be seeing anything like that. What about phrases like blithering woman?
Yeah, well, I personally wouldn't have changed that. I don't know quite the context and the reason for that. I do know that I've heard that certain homophobic elements have remained. So there seems to be a pick and choose attitude of what's happened. But I think it would be good to sort of hear from the Ian Fleming Foundation. It's the 70th anniversary of the book's being released. So I'm sure they quite enjoy the press talking about it. And I'm sure a few books will fly off the shelves. Yeah,
fingers crossed. But also just to, I think, really drill down in how stupid it is. I mean, James Bond as a character is, some would argue, a cold-blooded killer who, of course, is doing the national interest and all this stuff. I mean, it's also fictional. I know that Fleming obviously based things on certain real events, but it's fictional, right? So you've got a fictional, cold-blooded killing spy here who's on duty for Queen of... I mean, I'm sorry, but that can't be woke.
Well, he's not a great role model, is he? You know, he has character flaws. It's not like everyone's going around saying, this is your ideal fellow you should be. Of course, when we see the films, we see Sean Connery, Roger Moore and everybody, we're like, I want to be that guy. But it's in a knowing way. We know we can't act like that necessarily in real life. And he's doing it in the line of duty. You know, there's occasional things that he does do wrong, but we're all human, we're all flawed. And James Bond, Ian Fleming wrote James Bond as a flawed hero, I suppose. And we've got to accept that. And the films, you know, a lot of them look outdated now, but they're actually a bit more progressive than people give them credit for. I don't think we should bash them as much as we should.
I don't, and in fact, I quite enjoy watching them. I mean, I must say, I do find it absolutely hilarious. There's that man talk clip, of course, which is just quite funny, right? It is quite funny in my opinion. I'm going to... It's of its time. I'm going to read you a little statement now, and this is from Ian Fleming Publications Limited. We at Ian Fleming Publications reviewed the text of the original books and decided our best course of action was to follow Ian's lead. We've made changes to Live and Let Die that he himself authorised. Following Ian's approach, we looked at the instances of several racial terms across the books and removed a number of individual words, or else swapped them for terms that were more accepted today, but in keeping of the period in which the books were written. We encourage people to read the books for themselves when the new paperbacks are published in April. So, yes, I'll bring you back in now, because, yes, there's clearly quite a shrewd marketing tool, some would say, is to re-bring it to our attention. But I'm concerned, though, that characters like James Bond, who's a macho man, you know, puts it about a little bit, a man's man, some would say, hard-drinking, flawed, you just couldn't write about these days, and we're going to end up with big, fluffy non-entities, and that's all we're going to end up reading about.
Well, we've got to have the original editions. They've got to stay. even if they sort of edit these out and change them completely, and I don't think this is doing it too much, but say it got worse and they completely changed all the language, we've got to have those originals, and we've got to make sure that those are around, and those are the ones that are discussed, particularly things in classrooms. I'd love to have learned Ian Fleming in the classroom as a kid, but other books that contain offensive language should stay the same, and teachers should teach that you can't say that anymore, but this is the historical context of them.
Exactly. Look, thank you very much, Thomas. Keep up the good work. Thomas Pickup there, the host of the Really 007 podcast, reacting to the fact that James Bond, of all people, is potentially about to be censored. I can't help but wonder what James Bond would have said about that.